Straight up. Welcome back to Bible Study. We are in Revelation, yay, and we are in chapter 9, and we are going into verse 7. Now, this is a really interesting part of the scripture, and when we went off the last segment, we were talking about how in those days shall men seek death and shall not find it. The mark of the beast has the ability to keep you from physically dying, and it will trap you in your flesh body to where you can never escape it. And that would be a nightmare beyond all nightmares. No child of God will take the mark of the beast. I want to show you something. Keep your spot there and boogie over to Revelation chapter 13 and verse 8 and watch this. And all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, that is the beast, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. It is only those who are not written in the book of life, only those who are not children of God who are going to take the mark of the beast. No child of God is going to take it by mistake. No child of God is going to take it under any circumstances. If you cannot, it won't affect the Gentiles. But if the Jewish believers cannot stand when all the way to their deaths, they will die before they ever reach that challenge. Okay? No child of God is going to take the mark of the beast under any circumstances. And that would be in the second half. So, rest easy in your mind. The children of God are all going to be saved, every single one of us. Not a single one is going to perish, okay? And we are not here to determine our eternal destiny. We are here to live for Christ. We're here to run a race. We're to become what we are supposed to be, what he's designed us to be, okay? Now, in verse 7 of Revelation chapter 9, and the shapes of the locusts. We're talking about these locusts that came out of the bottomless pit. This is carnage. I mean, these things have a stinger like a scorpion. It's possible these things are like little drones that can fire injectable darts. And their sting is described as that of a scorpion. It's possible. Because these things are very weird looking. Now notice it says the shapes of the locusts were like unto horses prepared unto battle. And on their heads were as it were crowns like gold. And their faces were as the faces of men. Is that men driving drones? It could be. Have you ever seen on the net? I saw a demonstration where they had all these little drones that are like the size of the palm of your hand. And they release them by the thousands, and they can target certain parts of the population. They can be fed DNA information, which means they would target only Jews or target only a certain type of people. it's really interesting technology and actually really scary, to where if it's programmed to go after certain people with a certain DNA structure, that would really be scary, wouldn't it? But see, this is a judgment from God. So I think it is the tares and the wicked that are tormented, and not the children of God, okay? In verse 8, it says they had hair as the hair of women. How weird is that? And their teeth were as the teeth of lions. This is some creature, isn't it? Now, could this be some kind of a genetic hybrid type of thing? I don't know. These things rise up out of the bottomless pit, so they are not coming out of a lab somewhere. They come out of this bottomless pit that is opened. But they are otherworldly type of creatures. They're not anything like what we have seen before, but they're scary. And in verse 9, and they had breastplates, as it were, breastplates of iron. And the sound of their wings was as the sound of chariots of many horses running to battle, which makes it kind of sounds like drones in some ways, doesn't it? And drones do have injectable capabilities. They can fire a dart at you and inject you with something with it. So it's a possibility. In verse 10, and they had tails like unto scorpions, and there were stings in their tails. And their power was to hurt men 5 months. They are going to hurt people, and they are going to hurt only those who are not sealed. Okay? The ones that are sealed don't have to worry about it. The 144,000 have the seal in their forehead, but the other children of God who remain here are sealed by the Holy Spirit in here, like we are now. Okay? In verse 11, and they had a king over them, which is the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon, but in the Greek tongue hath his name Apollyon. These are demons. In verse 12, one woe is past, and behold, there comes 2 woes more hereafter. Now there is a demon army that is described in the scriptures. Let's see. I think it may be back here. When we get to that, we'll go through it, but they're scary. I mean, they run as fast as horses. Their legs are big and strong. They're very big creatures. Their legs are very strong. They can run as fast as a horse can run. And it's okay. Let's go into the 6th trumpet judgment in verse 13 of Revelation chapter 9. And the 6th angel sounded, and I heard a voice from the 4 horns of the golden altar, which is before God, saying to the 6th angel which had the trumpet, loose the 4 angels which are bound in the great river Euphrates. And the 4 angels were loosed, which were prepared for an hour and a day and a month and a year. So their time to be released is preset. For to slay the 3rd part of men. In this part, 1/3 of those who remain on the earth alive are killed. 1/3. Now remember, we had the 4th seal, which takes 1/4. And now we have, let's see, the 6th trumpet judgment slays 1/3 of those who remain after that. So during this time, we are moving closer and closer to the end of the 7 years and the great tribulation period, and you'll have the Battle of Armageddon as well. And I think the way that works out, you have the Muslims surrounding Jerusalem in these wars that are coming. You're looking at 3 phases of wars. You're looking at the Muslims surrounding Jerusalem, and they will probably come up from the south. Those are the ones that Libya and several other North African nations, as well as Sudan and Ethiopia in Northeast Africa, they could come up through the Red Sea and disembark at Jordan and go straight up that mountain range on the Jordanian side, up above the Red Sea, and then they would come across the top of the Red Sea, and there's the valley right there that goes from the Red Sea all the way to the Old City in Jerusalem. That's the Kidron. It's also known as the Valley of Jehoshaphat, and it's also known as the Valley of Decision. And it goes right all the way up to Mount Zion into where the Old City is now, the Old City of Jerusalem. I've been over there, and you can kind of get a better idea of how it works when you've been there and seen it yourself. So I hope all of us get to visit, at some point before all this is all over, but now is probably not a real good time to go. But this is a third part of men, another third that dies, yet a quarter, and then you have another third after that, right here at this 6th trumpet judgment, from these 4 angels that are bound in the great river Euphrates. Now the Euphrates is dried up, and that is where the kings of the east, that is China and all of those Asian armies, 200 million man army, coming across the dried Euphrates into the valley of Megiddo. And then you will have the Battle of Armageddon. But see, you have the Muslims surrounding Jerusalem first, and they die right there in the Kidron. Then you have Iran, Russia, and Turkey coming down from the north, and they die right there in the Golan Heights. And then, let's see. So you have, that's 2. And then, remember, it's the Catholics who are ruling Jerusalem the whole second half. The Muslims aren't. They're dead. The Jews have had to flee. And the Pope is ruling from the temple in Jerusalem. Now, once Russia, Turkey, and Iran are out of the picture, and the Muslims are out of the picture, you have the EU and the West, including the Pope, who is in charge of Jerusalem. Now, China cannot allow the West to control the Middle East's oil and gas reserves. So China brings their army over, and then you have Armageddon. And so those 3 wars, the Muslims surrounding Jerusalem, then you have the king of the north, and Turkey, Russia, and Iran coming from the south, from the north, moving south toward Israel's northern border. And then at the end, you have Armageddon. And you're looking at, 4 years from now before it's all over and done? All of those wars will be all over and done by then. These things are upon us. In verse 16 of Revelation chapter 9, and the number of the army of the horsemen were 200,000. That's the Chinese. That's a 200 million man army coming across the Euphrates. Excuse me. And it says, and I heard the number of them. And China already boasts a 200 million man army. In the 60s, they started killing off the little baby girls. And so now, in this generation, well, not in the 60s and in the 80s, really, but they began killing off their girls because they only permitted 1 child per family. And everybody, had to have a son to take care of them in their old age, and they aborted all these daughters. So now you've got a 200 million man army because you don't have enough wives for all of those men. A woman is a scarce and rare and precious thing over there in the age group of what these men are. In verse 17, and thus I saw the horses in the vision, and them that sat on them, having breastplates of fire and of jacinth and of brimstone, and the heads of the horses were as the heads of lions. And out of their mouths issued fire and smoke and brimstone. Now notice that these aren't literal horses. What when he's talking about a horse, he's talking about some form of transportation. Okay? Like a horse can be a motorcycle. It can be an armored vehicle. But look here. He says, and the heads of the horses were as the heads of lions. This could be an armored vehicle, or like a Jeep or something like that. Because if you notice, like on an armored vehicle, it has the two headlights that look like eyes, and then it has a steel grille that looks like lion's teeth. Okay? You're talking about a prophet here who is completely unfamiliar with technology, who is making an attempt to describe what he sees using only the references with which he is familiar. So he says, the heads of the horses, these vehicles he's seeing, were as the heads of lions, and out of their mouths issued fire and smoke and brimstone. These are vehicles like tanks or some kind of an assault vehicle that is firing things across the sky. And out of their mouths issued fire and smoke and brimstone. So this could be nuclear missiles being fired. In verse 18, by these three was the third part of men killed, by the fire and by the smoke and by the brimstone which issued out of their mouths. A third of the human race that still remains here at this time is killed with nuclear war. That's what this is saying. For their power is in their mouth. That's at the tip. And in their tails, for their tails were like unto serpents, and had heads, and with them they do hurt. That sounds like a tank to me, that has a long barrel sticking out. That it says their power is in their mouths and in their tails. Out the front, you have the ability for these tanks and stuff to fire weapons, right? And out the back, they can also fire missiles and weapons. It says, for their tails were like unto serpents and had heads. So this could be the barrel coming out of a tank, and it has the head part on it. And then this weapon comes out of it. Fire comes out of it. And this is the prophet trying to describe technology that he has no reference to really be able to describe, except for lions' heads and power in their tails and scorpions and stuff like that. In verse 20, and the rest of the men which were not killed by these plagues, the nuclear war, yet repented not of the works of their hands, that they should not worship devils and idols of gold and silver and brass and stone and of wood, which neither can see nor hear nor walk. They're nothing. In verse 21, neither repented they of their murders, nor of their sorceries, nor of their fornication, nor of their thefts. They are not changing the way they behave because they are wicked. They are created as vessels fitted for destruction, like a paper cup, which fulfills a purpose and then is discarded. Now, does anybody have any questions? Hi. Hi, sister. Hi, Mal. It's nice to see you. Let's see. Do you have any? I'm looking to see if anybody has any questions here. I don't see any at the moment. Okay, let's go over here to YouTube and see if we've got any requests over here or questions. Oh, did you just have an earthquake, Cheryl? Wow. Hi, Natasha. Nice to see you, sister. I'm monitoring several channels. The show is broadcast on Facebook, YouTube, on the network, on the CUBN network, and on the show's website at Believers Central World ProphecyUpdate.com. Believers Central ProphecyUpdate.com. We're all over the place out there. Hi, Karen. It's good to see you, sister. I'm looking to see if there's any questions. You started going to church and you didn't like it much? Well, go and find one where the pastor really loves God. You know, that makes all the difference. If the pastor loves God and he's not just a hireling in it for a paycheck, then you're going to learn by the Spirit. You know, and you will. You'll learn that way by the Spirit. Okay, let's keep going. Now we're going to go into chapter 10 of Revelation. And I saw another mighty angel come down from heaven, clothed with a cloud. I'm trying to picture all this in my mind. I encourage you to do the same thing too. As you hear the description here, kind of picture this in your mind. Saw another mighty angel come down from heaven, clothed with a cloud. So there's a cloud and there's this angel sticking out of it, is what comes to my mind. And a rainbow was upon his head, and his face was as it were the sun, and his feet as pillars of fire. Now that's interesting description, isn't it? So this angel comes down, descends into our atmosphere. In verse 2, and he had in his hand a little book open. And he set his right foot upon the sea and his left foot on the earth. So this angel has one foot upon the sea, and he's standing probably near the shore, one foot on the sea and one foot on the earth. And cried with a loud voice as when a lion roareth. And when he had cried, 7 thunders uttered their voices. Now these 7 thunders very well could be nuclear explosions. Okay, we have nuclear explosions over here, where a third part of mankind is killed. Now keep in mind, the globalists, who are the synagogue of Satan, the disinherited tribe of Dan, they all work together. There's only 2 sides. Now see, it looks like all these world leaders can't seem to get along, but they're all taking their orders from the same boss man, which would be Satan, Lucifer, okay? There's only 2 sides. Now, their goal is depopulation. They're not really fighting among each other. Remember, Satan doesn't cast out Satan. A kingdom divided against itself cannot stand. So they're all working together. They look like they're fighting. They look like, they want us to anticipate war, but they don't want us to understand what's really happening here. It's all about depopulation. You have Iran's government has already agreed that 17 million people is acceptable losses to them. Acceptable losses. That's insane. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be back.